These are my two Radius servers. And this is the Fortigate Firewall on version 7.0. And on server 1 and server 2, I have two users created. So the two users are SUMIT1, SUMIT2. And if you want to know how to set up the Radius server, free Radius services on your Linux machines, well, you can refer my last video where I have explained everything about how to set up the free Radius services on your Linux machines like CentOS and Ubuntu, and how to test the remote authentication using the Radius services. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can utilize the remote Radius authentication for the firewall authentication. This is my FortiGate firewall. Let's get to our Radius configuration first. Inside the user and authentication, click on Radius server, click on create, name the profile. Authentication method, you can keep it as default, or you can click on specify and add the NAS IP. Since I do not have the NAS IP configured in my Radius server, so I'll go with the default one. And next comes the primary server. This is the Radius server, which is the primary server. In my case, server 1. So the primary server is at .2. And the secret is, again, as per the configuration, I have added 2 devices here. So you can see here, I've added the device. And I have the secret defined here. I'm going to use the same secret on this is the same secret what I have defined here in my Radius server. And then let's try to check the connectivity. I guess I mistyped the password. Let's try to check again. Okay, now this time it is showing as successful. Now let's try to test our user credential. This is going to be the user here that we have defined in our Radius server. Let's try to check them. And the corresponding password. Let's try to test it. You can see here, successful, close. That means everything is working fine. Now comes the secondary server, Radius server, which is going to be our server 2. So this is our server 2. This is our backup server. With exactly the same users defined, I guess. Okay. So here again, I have defined the same secret, which is the client device secret configured on Radius server. This is the IP address of the Fortigate firewall. Actually, this is the IP address of the interface connected to the Radius server. By that I mean, whenever the firewall will try to reach out to the Radius server, will then be using the exit interface as 192.168.0.108, which means the Radius server will see the source as 192.168.0.108 when it receives the request from the FortiGate firewall. Now let's try to check the connectivity. Successful. Let's try to check the user authentication. Let's try to check the SUMID2. Successful. That means both the servers are properly configured and I have the required connectivity. So you can click on OK. So now we have our Radius server configured, primary and secondary. Next comes the user group. Click on create. Name the user group. I've named it as Radius group. And select the type as firewall. Make sure you do not add any members here. I'll show you the mistakes that people do while configuring the Radius server and while trying to use the remote authorization using the Radius services. So I'm going to keep it as blank, but I'll show you the effect of why I'm keeping this as blank. Click on add remote group. And you can see here, this is our last profile, the Radius profile, whereas in we have the server 1 and server 2, primary, secondary. Select that. And then groups, you can see it as any, or you can click on specify. By the way, this is a vendor specific attribute. If you have that defined on your Radius server, well, you can specify that. And you can get the vendor specific ID directly from the Fortigate website, or you can just type in and search for that. So this is the attribute that you should have. This is the vendor specific ID. This is the vendor specific attribute that you should be using to configure this particular VSA attribute on your free Radius server. 12356 is the ID. And then once you configure the attribute there, you can copy paste the name of the attribute here. It could be anything, test or something. But in my case, I do not have that attribute defined. So I'm keeping it as any and click OK. So now we have the user group, which is our Radius group. Now let's try to create a user. So you can select the remote Radius user and click next. You can type in the first username and then select the Radius profile. Click on next. Submit. Okay, so this is my Radius server. User. Okay, so now we are done with the user and authentication. Click on system. Admin profile is already configured, super admin. We are going to use this particular profile. Click on administrator. Click on administrator new, try to create a new user. I guess there was no need for us to create that last user, the Redis user. And you can just name it as anything like SUMIT1. And then you can click on the second option, which will then do a wildcard matching so that I can fetch all the related users. You can see it has match all users in a remote server group. So it is going to match all the users. Click on the admin profile. You can use super admin so that we have the read write access for all the users that will try to access the firewall. Remote group, you can see it as radius group and then click OK. So I guess here you do not, I mean, there is no need of this particular user. Just the user group here, radius group. Inside the system settings, admin profile is already there. Click on administrator and then that's it. This particular profile will match all the users in that particular free radius server group. Click OK. All right, so I was talking about the group here. So for example, if you create a group, let's say testing. Okay, and then if you try to add any member to that group, and then you add the group as the free radius, and then click OK. Now, if you go back to your system administrator, and if you try to add a new administrator, let's say, this is just a profile. And then if you click on the next option, match all users in a remote server group. And then when you try to select the administrator profile and then comes to the next option, which is the remote user group, you will not actually see that group if you add any member to that group. Okay. And to fix it, you will have to go back to that particular group, which is our testing group, and remove this guest from the members. Only then it'll be visible inside the remote user group. So now if you see, I will have both the options visible. So make sure you do not list any members inside that particular group, inside user and authentication. Otherwise, you will not see the group properly inside that tab. And you can see here the type is remote plus wildcard, which means it will match all the users. And to confirm that, I'll try to log out of this. I'll try to log out from this particular active session. Okay, let me try to use the radius user. This is my first user. Password is my password secret for this particular user. And you can see here, I'm able to log into the firewall and have the read write access as well, because I've selected the profile as super admin. And to confirm that the request is actually reaching our radius server, we can try to capture something here. You can see here, I'm logged in as the first user. And then I can try the second user as well. Let's try to log out and test the second user. You can see here the request and reply. 192.168.0.108 towards the server one, which is our primary server. So that proves that the Radius integration is working fine, and we are able to authenticate we are able to use the firewall authentication. We are able to authenticate the users remotely defined in the Radius server. So this is how you do the firewall authentication using the Radius services. And we can do one more thing. We can try to capture some packets so that we can see the captures. All right, let's try to capture some packets on our port 3, which is connected to our Radius servers. Yes, we need the filter. Port is going to be 1812, which is our Radius port. Let me try to see if I log out and log in, will this packet capture be still active or not? Okay, let's try to log out and re-log in. You can see the packet here, request and reply. Now let's try to get back to our original captures that we have. Packet captures. Okay, we have 2 packet captures there. Let's try to stop it. Now let's try to download it. So you can see here the Radius request and reply protocol as Radius. If you expand the tab, attribute values, you can see here, NAS identifier, Fortigate. This is the name of the Fortigate Firewall. You can see the name of the user. You can check the password, which is encrypted. This is the port. This is port 1. By the way, this is, I guess, the calling station ID, not the actual IP used. Admin login. vdom root. So these are the information inside the Radius protocol, which runs on the UDP. And you can see the port as 1812. If you come to reply, you will see the code as accept, which is having the opcode as 2. This is having 1, 2. And you can see the token as well. All right, that's all in this video. If you have any questions, any query, do leave them in the comment section. And please do not forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. It really helps me make more videos like this for you people. See you in the next video.